Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to give you that shortcut, to really getting up to speed on complex stuff. You asked us to make sense of this political earthquake in South Korea. So, our mission today, unpack the recent election, see how Gen Z voters completely changed the game.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one because the data, it shows this wasn't just a small increase in turnout. It really was, like the sources say, a kind of revolution.
A revolution. How sick.
Well, you have these young voters, right, under 35's Gen Z, younger millennials. They turned out in record numbers, truly massive.
Hmm.
But here's the kicker. They didn't vote how anyone expected, not along those predictable ideological lines.
Right, and that's the core of it, isn't it? Because for so long, South Korean politics, it felt stable, predictable even. You knew who turned out, you knew whose priorities mattered, and that was overwhelmingly the older generation, seniors.
Exactly. That context is key. Older voters were reliable, they showed up, so policy naturally skewed towards them. But this election, a total shift. Our research, it shows turnout for 18 to 29-year-olds jumped by almost 15 percentage points.
15 points, wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a ripple, it's a wave. A political
Yeah.
earthquake, like you said, it completely redrew the map, forced everyone to sit up and pay attention.
Okay, so let's unpack the why. Why this huge surge now? It wasn't just like a sudden burst of civic duty, was it?
No, not really. The sources, they strongly suggest this, came from years of frustration building up. A real feeling of being, well, ignored.
Ignored by politicians focused on the older voters.
Precisely. Leaders seemed fixated on that established demographic, and young people felt left out of the conversation.
So what were the specific things driving them, the core issues?
It boils down to some really personal economic realities, things that felt urgent to them.
Like the housing crisis. I know that's huge in South Korea.
Oh, absolutely huge. It's not just, rent is high. It's systemic.
Yeah, well.
Homeownership feels like a fantasy for so many. They see how previous generations maybe had it a bit easier with systems like Jonesai leases.
Right, that unique rental system.
Yeah, and that system's kind of crumbled. Now they face these sky-high property prices. That traditional path to stability, it feels blocked.
Okay, so housing is one big pressure point. What else? Jobs.
Definitely jobs and the economy. They're often highly educated, university degrees,
Mm-hmm.
but they face this intense competition for stable work, especially the good jobs at the big companies, the T-ball. There's a lot of unstable work, low starting pay, a feeling that all the effort, the studying, it doesn't quite pay off like it used to.
And were they asking for specific kinds of jobs?
Yes, that's interesting too. They weren't just saying, give us jobs. They were demanding opportunities in, like tech, startups, green industries.
Yeah.
Areas they felt were the future, but maybe weren't getting enough focus.
And this connects to something else the sources mentioned, mental health. That came up politically.
It really did. And that felt new. The intense pressure, academic stress, the job hunt, just social pressures. It all adds up. Mental health struggles, even tragically high suicide rates among young people became something they demanded politicians address. Not just talk about, but act on.
Wow. So better access to counseling, maybe tackling work-life balance?
Exactly. Things like that. And underneath it all, there was this demand for equality and just having a voice, wanting leaders who actually listen,
Mm-hmm.
not just lecture, treat issues like gender equality fairly.
Okay, so you have all this frustration, housing, jobs, mental health, wanting a voice. That sounds like a recipe for a huge protest vote, right? Why didn't they all just flock to one opposition party?
That's where it gets really nuanced. Because the disillusionment, it wasn't just with one party, it was kind of with the whole system. They felt both major parties were part of the establishment that had overlooked them. So yes, they were motivated to vote, absolutely. But they weren't automatically loyal to the usual alternatives.
Ah, okay. So the frustration fueled the turnout, but not necessarily a unified direction.
Precisely. Which leads us to how they organized. Because this wasn't just about showing up, it was about how the whole campaign unfolded.
Right. Not on TV debates, but on phones.
Almost entirely.
Uh,
Smartphones were the main battlefield. Social media was their megaphone. Think YouTube explainers, quick TikTok videos breaking down policies, live streams, even political memes that made complex issues go viral.
So they bypassed traditional media, built their own spaces online.
Yeah, to a large extent. They formed these online communities to discuss stuff the mainstream news might gloss over, like deep dives into gender policy fine print or debates about digital privacy rights.
And how did the political parties react to this? They must have noticed.
Oh, they noticed. They scrambled. You saw parties launching youth outreach things, hiring digital creators, trying to, speak the language.
But it wasn't that easy to win them over, was it?
Not at all. Gen Z, they're digitally savvy. They weren't just passively consuming this stuff. They were fact-checking everything in real time.
Fact-checking, how did that work?
You'd see it constantly online. A politician makes a claim in a speech, and within minutes, people are sharing receipts, screenshots, links to reports, old quotes proving or disproving it.
Sharing receipts, I like that. So holding them accountable instantly.
Exactly. It forced a level of honesty, or at least made dishonesty much harder to get away with. They couldn't just rely on vague promises anymore.
It's a powerful shift. Okay, so they showed up, they organized online, they demanded honesty. But then how did they vote? This is the twist, right?
This is the big twist. They did not vote as one solid block. Not at all.
So not all progressive.
Definitely not. It defied that old assumption that young voters automatically equal progressive votes. They split. All over the place, really. Some went progressive, sure. But others backed conservative candidates. Some even went for third parties or independents.
Okay, hold on. If they weren't united by ideology, what did unite them? What were they looking for, if not a specific party platform?
One word kept coming up in the analysis: authenticity. And linked to that, trust.
Authenticity, meaning
Meaning they seemed drawn to candidates who spoke plainly, who maybe admitted they didn't have all the answers or even admitted past mistakes. Candidates who promised concrete reforms on those core issues, housing, jobs, rather than just reciting party lines.
so less polish, more real talk.
Kind of, yeah. It led some to back anti-establishment figures, people who explicitly rejected the career politician mold. And that could be someone on the left or the right.
Can you give an example, like what did authentic look like versus inauthentic?
Sure. The sources point to, say, a younger candidate doing an unscripted Q&A on a shaky phone live stream. Maybe they even say, I don't know the exact detail on that, but I'll find out. That was seen as trustworthy.
Okay.
Compare that to a very experienced politician giving a smooth, perfectly rehearsed speech full of generalities about stability or values, especially if they had a record of changing positions, that often got tagged as inauthentic and rejected.
So it was less about voting for a party and more about voting against what felt like the old, potentially untrustworthy establishment.
That seems to be a big part of it. Exercising independent judgment. And here's the crucial so what. Even though their votes were split, their sheer numbers made them decisive.
How so?
In several key urban districts, think Seoul, Busan, Incheon races were incredibly tight. That extra 15-point surge among young voters, even splitting different ways, tipped the balance.
So without them showing up, the overall election result would look different.
Absolutely. The final national picture would have been quite different. They didn't just participate, they actively swung key races. They were the deciding factor in many places.
Which brings us to the wider implications. This sounds like it's created a real generational divide in South Korean politics.
A profound one, yeah. It's widening. You have the older generations still generally leaning towards stability, experience, maybe more conservative values,
And Gen Z.
pushing hard for faster change on everything from gender equality policies and climate action to demanding more digital freedom and privacy. Very different priorities.
So what does this mean for the political parties going forward? They can't just rely on the senior vote anymore.
Not if they want to win, no.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental challenge to their relevance. Every major party now have to figure out how to genuinely connect with Gen Z, not just with ads during election time, but with actual policy that addresses their concerns.
It's a total power shift. And culturally, it sounds different, too. You mentioned they treated voting almost like a social event.
Yeah, there was that element. It wasn't just a solemn duty. People were taking selfies outside polling stations, using hashtags, sharing why they were voting. It felt like a collective movement.
A movement for what, specifically?
For a South Korea that listens, that adapts,
Yeah.
that moves beyond maybe some of the rigid ways of the past. Their message, loud and clear across all these platforms, was essentially, we're here now. We're not just the future. We're shaping the present.
And you see echoes of this elsewhere globally, right? Like Taiwan or the U.S.
You do. Youth movements, using digital tools, demanding change. It's a pattern. But the South Korean case is maybe especially striking because it happened in a place known for such strong traditional party loyalties. It really shows how digital age democracy can be incredibly powerful and, yeah, pretty unpredictable.
So wrapping up this deep dive, Gen Z in South Korea basically rewrote the playbook. They organized differently, voted differently, focused on authenticity over pure ideology.
They absolutely did. They showed up, demanded a seat at the table, and proved they could change the outcome.
A huge shift in power.
Which leaves us with a really important question, something for you, the listener, to think about. They've shown they can organize, they can act, they can shift elections, they've forced their way into the conversation. The question now isn't really about the youth anymore, it's about the establishment. Will the leaders who hold power actually listen? Will they make the real structural changes needed to address the issues that drove this whole revolution? That's the big question now.